Okay, hi everybody. Thank you guys so much for coming. But we kind of put this together because we know these are like really tumultuous times, um, politically and socially, and we kind of wanted to have an event where we show how like poetry and particularly like youth poetry can kind of serve as activism and hope in these sort of times. And yeah, Neha, do you want to add anything onto that?
Yeah, I feel like the main reason we chose this theme is because both of us have worked with poetry as forms of hope. And for me in particular, that has been, you know, really influential in the way that I write and the way that I view the world. And I think that would be really helpful to everyone to just sort of think about. So we are really excited for this.
So I was thinking we can just kind of go through everyone. Maybe Neha and I can start with our poems, and I think just everyone introducing their name, where they're from, if they're a Youth Poet Laureate, like what their title is. Uh, and yeah, Neha, would you like to start us off?
So I am DC's Youth Poet Laureate, and this poem that I'm about to read is set into six little mini poems, which fun. Wild Space Wanderer. Nights are strange. The concept of rest does not exist. One. Coated in blankets woven from bathwater, so self-absorbed, I stare to the sky, where thousands of particles should be bursting into superimposed glory. I can't see them, of course. Too busy pursuing material perfection, I had no rest for the cosmos. Now I'll choose to inhale hydrogen by the palmfuls, pen and binoculars in hand, floating up to the stars. Maybe they'll clear the photons consuming my brain, finally welcoming sleep. Two, the sun tries its best, I promise. Mercury swims oh so close to salvation, twisting and dancing like dandelion spurs, catching love personified on its feathery fingertips. It preens, a pearl glistening in a patchwork, drought-ridden, festering field, boiling away all atmosphere to pull itself closer in. Golden blankets shroud Venus in a hug so tight, a shredded cyclone singing unrelented melodies. The sun shoved waves of warmth so hot it stings any peace away. Poor Venus can't stop spinning. A glitch repeating so fast, so long, it can't listen to its own chanting. Oh, I can't breathe. Sing a hymn to Fortuna, O Mother Terra, for you landed perched on the spider's web of woven victory. 3.7 billion years of algal blooms and baby bird songs split by trophic levels, untouched harmony and melody intertwined on riverbanks. Sing a hymn to Spes, O Mother Terra. Be careful, you're fated to burn just like Mars, watching inward, a mirror glazed reflection of what is to come. Dried riverbeds engraved with saltwater tears, a cacophony of silence wails. Sometimes your best is not enough. 3. Why does Jupiter get to name all the other planets? No, seriously, what makes Jupiter so special? The Jovian planets, named for the failed star, supermassive swirling storm with a superiority complex the same size as it's towering over me. It's not as pretty as Saturn's frozen army flowing in a permanent aurora around it. Not as funny as poor Uranus is to the 7-year-old kids who, when hearing the name for the first time, have to bite their lower lip and swallow. Not as domineering as Neptune's endless ocean plucked from tins of oil paint found inside seashells and fireplaces. Jupiter isn't even close to perfect about anything. Why is it allowed to be an ordinary failure, yet still crowned king by the cosmos? 4. Painting the Kuiper Belt. The misfits of the Milky Way use all the gray, painted black sheep exiled, forbidden from leaving their orbit, forgotten by time. Yet the ones who dare, they'll blink away, eroding the belt's seams far from the sun's lurking gaze. Manta ray wings outstretched, they'll swim, bathed in stardust and endless possibilities. 5. Below the Oort cloud is where I think hell is. Cold, empty, something bigger than dread carves rivers through my aorta. Shivers ring my thoughts. I can't see anything. Enveloped in what has to be a black hole. This has got to be sensory deprivation, psychological torture. The more I float, the less I see. 10,000 years pass in a minute, and I finally see something passing slowly, yet speeding through infinity. Colors. Nebulae engulfing me like a tsunami, caressing me in a blanket whole universe is high. And oh, I finally get it. This is what God is. I swim to the top and see sprawled in front of me everything. Tiny little specks of silt, infinity white hot quartz born from the sun's core. It's all so small, so bright, and yet somehow I am smaller. 6. Terra firma once more. I think of the dog-eared rejection letters smushed under sheets, and I'm only hit with a wave of overwhelming calm. It doesn't matter, just a piece of earth that will die and become stardust again and again. I lie bathed in reeds and floating willow blossoms and sunsets overhead part for the nightscape I lived through. Celestial liberation grabbed by all who dare to dream of dove wings and hugs. The Yuga cycle I saw will pass in the thump of foot on sand, all for the present and eventual crush, giving birth to new spring. And with an exhale blowing life back into the Earth's surface, I spread my roots into the atmosphere and lay coated in waves of self-created purpose, the only chains that matter, singing along to the birds' trills and crinkle of leaves falling against mountains of stardust in a ripple of dirt.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Neha. Um, I guess I can go next, and then maybe after me, Vanessa can go. These are both poems I wrote that are inspired by the current political climate. And I feel like while they might not seem hopeful at first glance, I think writing as a form of activism is kind of inherently hopeful because it shows that people still have a creative voice that can be used to speak up for what is right. Um, so sorry if they're not immediately uplifting. Um, so the first one is based on an event that happened a few months back, earlier in the year, um, when a woman who was on the subway in New York was set on fire. I don't know if any of you guys remember that, but I wrote this poem inspired by that tragedy, and I feel like it kind of just feeds into this cycle of violence that's passed down through generations of women. So I wrote this poem, which is called "I Go for the Cure." Gasping, I tell White Coat there's something tough red stuck in the base of my spine, and he pities me. It will scar whether you run out of air or swallow the bullet, but I just want to kiss a daughter goodbye. It was in my dream last night, her fledgling body with its own ribs. When I left, I was born on Halloween in the suburbs. 18 years later, a woman on the subway is set on fire, and the ash was somehow beneath the womb nubs of my fingernails. The doctor who delivered me couldn't seem to explain the stains. Once I learned to speak, I said the smoke was hiding in my lungs. For a long time, it sat in wait, in neat, dime-wide roller curls like the ones that once billowed from steaks, hardening under the heels of lean chicken thrown to the dogs, of sloppy-mouthed kisses, the knowledge of what's at stake, waiting for a long time, like most of them do, for the look away. And when the spine didn't bow, the smoke traveled there, made it so, hot, hot and tough red, barely bleeding, and I thought maybe it was the envy of past self, but in my dream, a girl brushes her warm lips close to my forehead, my spine, I am naked and pale, and there is lead in my stomach. It will scar, White Coat frowns, his hand on our shoulders, and I cannot smooth it. I just want, and then the girl is burning, a lovely small thing like a memory, and there is something. So that's the first one. So I wrote this second poem to make sense of my conflicted feelings about our country leading up to Independence Day this year. And the 4th of July happened to coincide with the 10th anniversary re-release of my favorite album, Carrie and Lowell by Sufjan Stevens. And on this album, Stevens has a song called 4th of July, and he did a re-release of the song that was like 14 minutes long. So I wrote this while listening to that and thinking about the 4th of July. And it's called After Sufjan Stevens' 4th of July version 4. A sky creased with the veins of a dying universe, a closed, sputtering movement, the evil it spread against a chorus of sirens and tortured dogs. Could I be the sky, head bruising against the hard grass of our new apocalypse? I am myself at 8 years old, mouth stained with sugary red dye, mouth too full to speak, and there was no need then. Now, where am I? eating charred meat, drinking in our checker patterned love, and all I can think is, tell me, what did you learn from the Tillamook burn? And that sound, which cracks open our stars, a sound like a dove's bones breaking. Did you get enough love? How far does sound travel before it loses all meaning? Before our sunscreen slathered bodies become memories, wishes made by those with faces stained with that red dye. We're all gonna die on shooting stars. So when is the tree falling swallowed by a headline? Before I say goodbye, something in the chlorine smells different now. It weighs on this place across the sky where those sparks die out. My fading supply, a home, my star in the sky, I hardly recognize anymore. Thank you. So next is Vanessa.
So I was thinking about this prompt for a long time, poetry is hope, because I feel like I haven't been able to define hope in a very long time. Um, like Lily said, there's this version of hope that is more passive, that's actualized in the ability to do something rather than in the expression of hope itself. So to write a protest poem, to protest against something is a form of hope, despite the fact that you need to protest because you are able to. I think the type of hope that I've been contemplating a lot these days is more to do with representation. Um, I think when I feel most hopeful, it's usually when I'm interacting with a piece of my culture or my language or my heritage or the heritage that I am in the process of finding and becoming. When I find it somewhere I don't expect it to. Um, so here's my first poem that deals with intersectional identity. My image. Okay. This first poem is called Check and Go. We're playing chess on a Go desk in Ayi's home. Your ama is chatting with mine somewhere downstairs, giving the wooden floorboards a gentle hum. You're wearing the thin linen that makes the village boys go mad with want and shame. When I ask you to turn on the fan, the wind of you passing me makes me shiver. In your bedroom, the windows are slim and long and emanate light like youth. A time ago and away. I don't lose to you this time. At some point, we might have abandoned the game, but before then, I finally tell you what you've done to me. You absentmindedly press your fingers into my palm. Fused yourself. Hello. Um, Fused yourself with my softness. Hold it to the coolness of the desk. Become the story too intimate to read aloud to family. Never moving your gaze, quiet and dark and impenetrable. Stained my hands with your name in calligraphic ink, filled in the bodies of my landscapes with soft washes of water. We both know it's no good to say these things out in the open. What if our floor falls and we tumble through our mother's ceilings? What if the water chestnuts don't grow in time for spring? What if one of us gets married, dies, or stops feeling before the future arrives? The one where our families are in some vague away and where we acquire our impossible freedom. In this generation, we know it has to be enough to watch the other escape, even knowing we are a part of the life left behind, the emigration story, the nomad, go desk, ink wash, water chestnut life that is too intimate to tell anyone in the new world about in detail. So that was the first poem. It was called Check and Go. It's based on like checkers and the game of Go, and the clash of East and West when the board games first encountered each other. My second poem is after Robert Sapolsky, who is a biologist. You guys might know him by some of his books or his online lectures, but he talks a lot about evolution and how humans have evolved into these distinctly feeling creatures. I'll just read the poem for you. It's called City-State Romance. Like telling stories of witchcraft, we think, I imagine a house. You believe in our house. In a rupturing world, we think of nurseries that white people have in their TV shows, daily dinners at a restaurant, tax benefits, and even larger numbers. For throwing the right trays into the right bins, for saying we are anti-genocide, for want of a future. I imagine hours spent together, listening to carefully assembled waves of sound. You believe in the moral story taught by opuses and tone poems. Bridges crumble, the stock market shreds lightning, men's green faces on green papers deteriorate, and employer sums become even more desperate. We see tailored Armani suits and charity balls for lost causes. We stay within the law, even when lawyers have lost their magic. There is still music, because there must be music, and because we feel something amid the noise of dying. I imagine us at the edge of a dying world, and you believe me. The last poem that I have for you is my most recent one, and it's based on a work of art by Rodin, the sculptor. It's unfinished. It was a commissioned gate at the door to a church, I believe, or maybe a city hall, something like that. It's called La Porte de l'Enfer, which just means the gate, the door to hell. He never finished it. And at first I was like, maybe I shouldn't read this poem because it still feels quite unfinished, but I guess the form fits the content. So here it is. And it's about how we cling to love, even when things seem hopeless. La Porte de l'Enfer, Rodin, unfinished. Little by little, Auguste fades from his workshop. A couple slips gently into each other's arms under a hot moon, blaring bands of silver, aflame with carbon stains. I'm only seeing a fragment, a bit from a museum far, far away from the rest of everything. The cast of stone cradles them. Below, a ruin of unmentioned lovers that are somewhere in Paris. Aren't you afraid? I want to ask by sketching their bodies alone. Above, a timed comfort, low-relief stone, half-formed chests and torsos, half-baked sensuality just about to happen, a world just colored by the threat of morning. This time, it's enough to just be still, they whisper, to be close, and reach an arm through the horror vacui, groping for day. I strain to hear what they tell me to listen to. The hope of words, breath, and poetry shaping life. The work of metal squeezing marble into trembling fat and flesh. Life that is still life, even if it's isolated and incomplete. Faces half-etched and lacking context, frozen by the sculptor's death. They keep their eyes closed, two half-moon shutters, brows immortally restful. I don't really understand. I catch the curve of her white hip, the sketch of lightning falling silently on her outline. How can this be it? This shoulder of pain. It's the start of meaning. Gods somewhere right of the tympanum, right out of their periphery. It's only been a few days. We take and lose names, so it's not a personal thing to wait for hell. Stay and watch, locked in brimstone. Heaven is just wherever you know you're loved. Thank you.
Thank you, Vanessa. That was phenomenal. Vanessa is one of my personal favorite poets, so I'm so glad we could get her today. She's also the Youth Poet Laureate of New York State.
Oh, sorry, I
know.
forgot to
We mentioned
introduce myself.
we all forgot to introduce ourselves like
Yeah,
immediately.
yeah.
But thank you so much, Vanessa. Radian, are you able to go next?
Yeah, sure. So I'm Radian. These poems, I guess, are kind of similar to Lily's in that they might not appear immediately hopeful. When I think about hope in poetry, I kind of think of witness as hope. So by witnessing, I guess, the pain that the world right now is inflicting on so many people, by witnessing that and witnessing through that pain humanity, I think that's the clearest view of hope you can get through poems, at least in my own work. So I've just been trying to decide between a couple poems on which ones I should read. I think I'll start with one narrative poem and then one kind of more experimental one. This first one is called Trans-Pacific Love Story. Let me make sure I have the right draft up. Yes, I do. Emptying the truck was Seungpyo's first job in America. Passing cardboard boxes through gradations of night, letting them fall upon the belt with the arrhythmia of raindrops. The stopwatch throbs in the manager's hand like a headache, worsened by the fluorescent bulbs, which glare like no natural thing. The rain doesn't let up. Routing the bruised packages was his second job, one per second. No romantic metaphors here. Enveloped by artificial dark, sealed with artificial light, his legs and chest remember the bright snow he was made to stand in waist deep by his superior officers. How he began to feel warm again as he numbed. How this was the first stage of death. How this is the way he feels in Aaron Brown's arms between shift and school, and the way he will feel telling his son this story like a love story, a broken myth. And that poem was based off of my parents' story of how they met and my father's immigration story. This next poem is a little bit longer. It's based on partly an erasure of a internal United Healthcare slideshow with their own kind of internal language and how they talk about denials of care and who deserves care. And it's a haibun, so there are some haiku fragments in there. And I think of those as the glimmers of hope through kind of this algorithmic language that's kind of oppressing us even in ways we wouldn't naturally expect. So this is an act of erasure, which I hope is an act of hope. I've never read this one aloud before, so we'll see how this goes. Transcription of internal United Healthcare slideshow as haibun. Prescript. Transcription of recorded UH phone calls and later statements. I knew that was coming. I did too. This woman screaming, we're still going to say no. They're really just pushing the envelope. To be honest with you, considering that we were paying through the end of this school year the most appropriate supply or level of service and will work with the patient to start titrating them down. I incorrectly made an assumption. I did not realize that simply does not occur, that there wasn't a decimal place that was out of line. I saw that it was not the correct doctor. I saw the initial outcome and I was asked to send it back. I have a lot of empathy for this member, but I needed to go back to Soaring Heights, a judicious review to make healthcare more affordable for our members because it shouldn't have existed. 1. Bend the curve on inappropriate expenditures. Make sure stakeholders get what they pay for. It's the right thing to do. The standard psychotherapy session is a 45 to 50-minute individual session, i.e. 90806. Evening hours are standard. To identify and stratify based on potential clinical risk of overutilization, Stratification accomplished. Algorithms run daily. Algorithms run approximately 15% of outpatient population. Discuss medical necessity for each case. Identified potential denial. Care deemed not medically necessary due to clinical reasons. Vital to have full history available to care advocates when conducting telephonic review. Vital to have mechanism for staff to uncover above stated activity. Vital are the dreaming eyes, tremors, untracked and untracking, bloodshot under lid. 2. Team reviews, analyses of algorithms to determine providers of interest. Practice pattern structures, internal meeting with vested parties. Intestinal intersections, winding, unseen and unfelt, inspired the labyrinth. 3. Provides services, provision of high intensity, provision of high frequency, provision of services for prolonged periods, i.e. long lengths of stay, provision of services to multiple family members, provision of multiple services on the same day, provision of services to members already in treatment, provision of services on weekends, holidays. Congregation of bodies, a dusting of snow on the steeple, dead skin cells. 4. Possible indications, true long days, services not rendered. Possible interventions, flag if education deemed insufficient for behavior change, recoupment, possible indications, routine provision of 90807, routine provision of high cost, routine provision of psych testing, possible interventions, conversation and education, review for evidence of necessity, recoupment. Possible indications, common upcoding, 90862 billed as 90850, 0709, multiple 90801s, 90806 billed as 90808. Possible interventions, flag if education ineffective, review for evidence of necessity, recoupment. Possible indications, patients appear sicker than actual, substantiate need. Patients appear less than actual in order to avoid. A moth alights on a flame, alights into smoke, the substance of need. 5. More difficult to determine. IDs are idiosyncratic to child rather than family. The modal treatment episode is 1. Unbundling. Soft hands pressed hard into soft self-wound. Unbundling like a sleeping bag. Sleep. 6. Watch for codes. Watch for routine. Watch for extended. Watch for being seen. For providers must answer the question, when is care necessary? Degree of impairment. Nature of treatment goals. Progress. Projected future. Mom wears turtlenecks to stop the scar across her throat from darkening. Already it's a hickey, a hieroglyph for what was extracted. By using these tabs, global distress, workplace presenteeism, workplace absenteeism, and caregiver strain located in clinician group, you were able to view comparative data showing the changes in global distress scores for your members as compared to our national data set. Between present and absent is movement, blurred in corporeality. The intent is not to ask every question. How long have they experienced these problems? How old were they when they had their first problem in this area? How do they usually function in this area? When this happened in the past, how were the symptoms impacting their function area in brackets? Were any issues at function area the main reason? Were they having any problems in the area of function area? How has the progress been? So what do you see as the outcome in terms of this issue? What is the member hoping this will look like at the end? How long do you anticipate this will take? Function. Blade paring away skin from cold cucumber, slipping, slicing nerve, numb finger scratching at my palm, searching, drawing blood. Verbal notification is given at the time of the decision to the treating provider. Documentation of denials, reduction of services are also mailed to the provider and the member. Non-response may result in an adverse benefit determination due to the lack of ability to substantiate necessity. Reviews should average 15 to 20 minutes. Thank you.
Wow. Oh my gosh. I'm like in shock. That was so cool.
Yeah, that was insane.
Yeah, like that was incredible, and I've never heard anything like it. Like so cool and so innovative. Uh, and just like pump you up for a second, Radiant. Radiant is the recipient of a full ride scholarship to UNC Chapel Hill for creative writing. And I can just, you can see why, obviously. Um, just like incredible work. So I think now, Sophie, you're wrapping us up, right? For the performance section.
Perfect. So yeah, my name is Sosie, and when I think of poetry as hope, I think that hope is inherently a poetic feeling. Um, and I think just the nature and the structure of poetry lends itself to being very hopeful. I think I'll love to say more about that once we begin with our panel. But with that in mind, I have two poems. One, I actually wrote yesterday. It's more journalistic, I think, than some of my other ones. Okay. This morning I dropped off 300 books in the most rural Maryland crop season. Shoving twilight in a church's little free library was not my sin to bear. It was one of many chores I had been neglecting. After the 7-hour trip, the only way to cleanse the house was to thread a sucky YA romance novel through my ears just to throw something away to my seasonal yearning. This afternoon, I received a letter from my past self encouraging me to remember my 16th birthday, when I screamed, "Everybody wants to rule the world," to a highway they kept running from me. Don't worry, alone, at home, you're always thinking about that, Sosie, because summer is the perfect time to think about everyone who has ever loved you while swiping and re-swiping the wooden banisters that line the stairway down to the glass kitchen table where you sit to dine and think of all those hearts again. All right, so that was my first one. And then I have a second one. It's short, but I think it very much aligns with the theme of this event. It's called Someday I'll Grieve Sociadane, which is inspired by Ocean Vuong's Someday I'll Love Ocean Vuong. Sosie, run. Adulthood is chasing you later. Don't eulogize your fish before its belly points to the future. Stand skinned, tall and limp. You've earned the loss of I in your name. Now it just reads SOS. Sosie, come here. Be here. Your tomorrow. You just need to know today is a shadow of your forgetting. Years will bead your necklace. Today, the charm. Thank you.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Sophie. Those were amazing. I think we're gonna just go straight into the panel. I love how everyone kind of already gave some hints to how they view poetry as hope and how everyone views it differently, which I think is really cool. Uh, I was thinking, so me and Neha each have three questions. So maybe we'll just like switch off. And I can start. I think that obviously if everyone wants to answer every question, that's great. But if not, we can also do just like have a few people raise their hands if they want to answer. Um, so my first question is basically what I just mentioned. What does poetry as hope mean to you? And you can just raise your hand or just start speaking if you want to answer.
I can go. Um, I think, yeah, like you said, we've seen pretty much like very different approaches to hope as a concept. We've approached it through like a passive form, an active form, a more somewhere in between type of form. But personally, hope is less of an idea to me than a feeling. Um, I'm very much so emotionally connected to things that I feel hopeful about. Like sometimes I'll see like a video somewhere online of like a good deed being done and I'm like, "Oh, I feel hope because it's like a feeling in my heart where I feel touched and connected to um the human species, I guess." Um and I think today there's quite a bit of turmoil happening around what qualifies as hopeful and what qualifies as radical, what qualifies as like protest poetry or whatever. But honestly, I think in order to truly understand hope as a feeling, you just have to let go of all of these restrictions, because it's going to be different for everyone. So the poetry is going to be different for everyone. I mean, out of the 3 poems that I wrote as like one person writing them, it already came out like 3 different ways. Um, and, living on this earth, especially as a writer who takes things from the physical world and sort of condenses them, sees to the innards of the situation. It's really important to just let things come and let yourself feel what you feel, without filtering it through like modern day media consumption rules, because there's no way to consume ethically. There's no way to consume hopefully. You can only feel what you feel as ethical or feel what you feel as hopeful.
Yeah, that was beautifully said. I love the idea of hope as sort of like a form of empathetic connection, um, that sort of interweaves people around the world together. I think that's really beautiful. Did anyone else want to have like a different answer or add on to Vanessa at all? And if not, we can move to the next question as well.
Sure, I can contribute. When I first saw Poetry as Hope, in addition to thinking about what I said earlier, I also was reminded of the Romanticism movement, that took up a lot of British poetry, and how that style of poetry essentially takes the more mundane elements of life and praises them and, sings songs of their tales of joy about waking up and maybe, going through your everyday routine, or maybe a poet takes a walk on a bridge and then they write a poem about it. Um, so I find a lot of hope in that poetry form, and um, in this interesting way, I think that an element of hope is one specific element of hope is temporal in the sense that it relies on um, an optimism towards a future. And in most cases, that is a better future. So it's interesting because the British Romanticism movement sort of looks back at prior events and injects them with positive feelings, but then hope is a way of looking towards the future with those same positive feelings. And so I think that um, poetry that romanticizes life works in a way that allows itself to be projected into a future where things are just as good as they were in the past, if that makes sense. It sort of there's a way to link the two. As the reader reads the poem, they might gain a sense of hope for the future that is similar to what the writer felt about the past. So.
That's so like eloquently put. I think that's so cool. And I love the idea also of hope as being like these small, like natural moments that that just happen to happen in life for every person who exists. And I think that also kind of goes back to Vanessa's point about how it interweaves us all together, because those are the kind of beautiful moments that happen to every living being. So uh yeah, I love that. Neha, do you want to go ahead and read your first question?
Sure. My first question is, what does artivism mean to you? What is artivism to you?
I guess I have something to say about that. I don't know if I'm the biggest expert on artivism. This is probably the first time I've actually heard that term, but I do like dealing with political issues and real world issues in my poetry. When when I approach kind of activist issues in my poems, I usually do so from a stance of as I was saying earlier, the term witness, of just taking in the world as it is and displaying what's wrong with it. What are the contradictions in the world that we live in today? What causes pain? What is it like to be human in this world? And I think that a lot of the times, once you just do that, I think solutions kind of arise from that by just holding on to the contradictions, not trying to seek a neat and tidy solution, not saying, oh, we need to do this or we need to do that, which is what a lot of times activism is kind of conflated with, or saying, or like saying, like a political party or political platform. I don't try to make my poems a platform for any political party or any particular stance, but I think that if you, all poets, but all the work of all poets is to look at the world as it is and kind of excavate it to show what it's like to be human in this world, what damage this world could does to the human body, to the human mind. And I think if you look at the world to that perspective, it will kind of guide you to a place of activism, to a place of making the world into a better place, which is better to be human and better to live as the like soft animals that we are, to quote Mary Oliver. So that's my perspective.
I think I take a really different approach. And I used to take that approach of poetry as a platform for elevating issues. Um, but I think now, and this is very specific to the things that I tend to write about, um, and the things that I'm interested in, because for me now, when I write activating poetry, poetry that makes people actively do something about something, right? I mean, active, it's in the name, or artivism, I guess. Um, for me, it's about contributing to a solution to the problem, which I know is what Radian was warning against. Um, but I think specifically for this problem, which is representation, I'm talking about like the lack of Eastern representation in Western forms such as poetry, or at least poetry in English, because I grew up in an environment that was utterly lacking in any literature um, about Chinese girls growing up in a foreign environment, even about being queer and also being Chinese, and how that intersection affects your gender roles, your family roles, filial piety, and other things like that, in addition to overlapping with American aesthetics and ideals. Um, that was completely just something that I had to figure out for myself, and that I'm still in the process of figuring out. And for me, activism is actively putting art, putting literature into the space where I haven't been able to find it. So my poem Check and Go is a sapphic poem in an Eastern setting in a Western form. It's so similar in its formation when you put it out there, but then if I had read it like ten years ago, I definitely would have been quite struck by the possibility of something like that existing. And that's what I think of when I think of activism. It's something that is contributing to your vision of what needs to be there in the world, or what needs to be amplified more.
To speak to the question of if art in relation to activism should propose a solution, or what is art's role in activism. The way that I kind of see it is, I think that art supplements activism that is already in the works. Um, I I want to use the example of a general statistic. For example, like let's say you come across a statistic about the current climate of the planet. And then you read a poem about maybe somebody's experience living among landfill. And I think that they supplement the experience or somebody's interaction with activism in two different ways. I think the statistic more so appeals to the brain, and then the poem appeals to the heart. And as a result, somebody who consumes both of those pieces of information or both of those types of media will have a more well-rounded understanding and feeling or sense of the issue at hand. So I think that's one way that art can act as a form of activism, in the sense that it can appeal to maybe the pathos or the ethos of somebody rather than just the logos. And it can make people feel, and sometimes it is that feeling that indirectly leads to change. So I think that there is a connection between maybe somebody consuming an art piece and then feeling compelled to go and act in the spirit of that art piece.
Are we moving on to the next question? Or...
Yeah, I can do my next question. That was a really good discussion though. Uh, so my next question is, do you guys have any favorite writer activists or writers who you feel use their poetry as hope or any other sort of um method to push forward any sort of, agenda, or maybe not agenda, agenda is the wrong word, but specifically writers who are activists or who kind of portray hope in a way that you enjoy?
Not a poet, but first thing that came to mind, Toni Morrison. Wow, what a writer. I mean, so much of what I'm talking about stems from ideas by Toni Morrison. Um, I mean, she was the one who talked about a writing that was what was it? Inexcusably, blank word, synonym for that, black. Like something that is definitely cultural and that belongs to a certain group of people. Um, I mean, for me, talking about a culture and what it means to have cultural writing and going back into a history that's 5,000 years old and compounding it with a history that's 200 years old. And then also looking at the history of the immigrants from that 5,000-year history into that 200-year history. I mean, there's just so much that goes into it. And whenever I read Toni Morrison's works, um, I'm almost always so inspired by the way she approaches such complicated topics with such nuance and empathy and human perspective. Um, I remember reading this essay by Zadie Smith on Toni Morrison. It was on Toni Morrison's short story called Recitative. Um, and Zadie Smith talks about how we can talk about race without using the deadness of category of racial categories, but conveying the richness of lived experience instead. How can we talk about racial issues without losing that human perspective of the life that we lead when we do identify in one of these dead categories? So in that same vein, I would also mention Danez Smith, who has done very, very well in maintaining that richness of lived experience. Um, and there's always so much life and so much emotion um, in their works, in their poetry. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, Toni Morrison is incredible. She's one of my favorite authors as well, and I think that her ability to talk about those topics is so unique, and also the fact that she's able to combine it with all these other genres and layers of um like all these other categorizations of literature is also really really cool in my opinion. Anyone else have any other artists? I would say like artists in general, like, yeah, writers, poets, yeah, visual artists if you're familiar as well. Okay, yeah. Bye, Chloe. Um, yeah, does anyone else have anything to add to this question?
I'll give a quick plug for Hong Kong, the Korean Nobel Prize winner, the Korean woman first, and I've read so far The Vegetarian and um, and along the issue of hope in poetry or hope in literature. I think it's a perfect. Oh no.
I think your Wi-Fi is going a bit in and out. I think it's a little bit better now, though. So I don't know
Should I
if
try to finish
everyone
or should
else.
I hand it over to someone else?
No, totally. Just maybe start over because I did not hear anything the first
Okay,
few
sorry.
sentences.
Hong Kong, Korean Nobel Prize winner. Human Acts is a great example of this kind of idea of literature and hope, because this is like it's a story of a massacre. Basically, it's going back in history through a variety of perspectives, people who were killed, like hearing from basically their souls, hearing from children who were dealing with the corpses, and just these horrific historical details. But Hong Kong kind of pursues this historical connection between her family and another family, and then through documentary like interviews and really rigorous and ethical techniques of dealing with history, she finds human moments in this, and the I don't want to say like reconciliation between humanity and violence, because those two can never be reconciled, but instead the preservation of humanity despite violence, and violence's intrusion on humanity. And really, without without saying anything directly, she really has this powerful political commentary on authoritarianism, on violence, on today's political climate in Korea, especially with what happened recently with the declaration of martial law. This is like a previous time martial law was declared in Korea, when dictators used it to use soldiers against their own people. And that kind of gives me a little bit better perspective on how Korea was so quickly able to get rid of that leader who did that, versus in America, when Trump deployed the Marines and threatened to deploy the Marines, and actually did deploy them, although I don't know if they were actually used in LA. And that just shows the relevance of these issues and how reading literature should give us, and reading literature and remembering history really is a great form of activism in its own way.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think just I'm going to answer my own question really quick right now. But that also kind of reminds me of another author that I love named R. Huang. Again, not a poet, but a fiction writer. And she does a really spectacular job of like interweaving fantasy and historical themes. And one of my favorite books of all time is a novel of hers called Babel, where she talks about um like colonialism and language and translation as a tool for imperialism. It's just really interesting to see how authors can sort of bring all these themes in whatever genre they're doing. Okay, yeah, Vanessa, go ahead. Thank you for coming. Um, so yeah, that's one of my favorite writer activists. Um, does anyone else have any other thoughts to contribute to that, or Neha can go on with her next question?
I can contribute some of my favorite artists. I really love Eve Ewing. I recently read a poem of hers, where it was mixed media. She was typing a portion of the story that she was telling. I mean, it's about police brutality. It's typed up, but then the next portion of it is handwritten, and so there's a picture of the paper that she wrote on, and it's this sudden shock of intimacy because it feels like as the reader you're reading her journal or her diary. So that was very striking to me, and I really enjoyed that. I also love James Baldwin, sort of in the same vein of just being able to put social issues in such a profound way. I think whenever I'm looking for a good use of rhetoric and a means to explore race or sexuality, I think James Baldwin has several different works addressing these several different topics. Um, yeah, he's very inspiring.
Yeah, absolutely. Neha, do you want to go ahead with your next question?
Sure. Um, my next question is, how do you guys stay hopeful during these trying times?
I guess I can go first. Immediately, what I thought of was music. I love music. I often say, I mean, I have perfect pitch, and I often say that I think music loves me more than I love it. It just, I'm also notoriously known for listening to music, except and ignoring the lyrics, and just listening for the instrumentation, and letting that inform my impression of the song, as opposed to actually paying attention to the lyrics and then letting my interpretation of those words inform how I feel about the song. Because I feel instrumentation has a lot to say, sans lyrics. But I mean, the poetry is beautiful as well. Not to discredit that. But I think that music as a means of uplifting the spirit is very helpful, and I do that. I listen to music essentially like every day. And there's never not a time when a song isn't going through my head. I think it's a way to stay grounded and stay connected and stay hopeful because the happy songs that we listen to are gonna remain happy as you keep playing them. So when I need a sort of refresh or a reset, I'll put on a happy song that's uplifting and it reminds me that I mean at least for like the 3 or 4 minutes that the song was recorded, that everything was okay. Okay. And it allows me to live in that as I listen. So it's very cathartic.
I would just say I read. I get off Instagram. I get off. I don't. I don't watch a feel good movie or anything. At the end of the day, even if it's a sad book, I find just reading a poem, a novel, gives you a firmer grip on the world. Even if it's again, even if it's sad or depressing, like a lot of people say art is, I really don't think it's depressing if it's good art. It connects you to other humans, the pain that everybody's feeling maybe at this time. And I think that really grounds you. I mean, you can numb yourself by scrolling on Instagram Reels, but once you're done with that, you're just hollowed out. You just fed yourself, I guess, an hour of propaganda. I found myself doing that last night, and I did not feel very hopeful about the world afterwards. But so before I went to bed, even though it was like 2 a.m. where I'm at, I picked up Dear Life by Alice Munro and read a short story, and I felt a lot more hopeful after that.
I love that. And I think that I feel like you were directly calling me out with the doom scrolling thing. But yeah, I think that it's really good to get off social media. To get off really any media, and that might be a controversial take, but I do a lot of like listening to political podcasts. I read the news a lot. And it's good to stay informed, but it's also good to give yourself a break. Um, and I think spending time with my loved ones is really helpful. And also just remembering that at the end of listening to all of these really depressing political podcasts, about how the world is crumbling, it is good to remember that there is sort of a light at the end of the tunnel. There's always a goal to work towards, whether that be some sort of like personal artistic goal that you have as a form of activism, or whether that's, working towards whatever the next step is in American democracy, the next election, um, and such. So that has really helped me, is to remember that there is somewhere to go, even though it kind of feels like a Sisyphean task. Like it is really helpful to remember that there's like a next step. Um, all right, I think I'll do the. I don't know why I just muted myself. Next question. And this is my last one, and it's more of like a personal question. How are you guys hoping to explore hope through your writing in the next few years? I know a lot of us are heading off to college or soon, so there is kind of a natural time of transition in this. I know not so, so you're a little, but yeah, like how are you guys doing that, and how might your writing sort of transition as you go on into this next phase of your life?
I'm not very good at predicting where my writing's going to go. It just usually goes places on its own. But I have found recently I've been trying more experiments like the second poem I read, or yeah, I read aloud earlier, where I'm trying to move past not just personal narrative and lyric poems into kind of dealing with things that I see as systemic issues in this world. And like even the issues of media, like I recently did another erasure poem, which I've been getting more into, where I turned a Pitbull song that kind of romanticizes partying as a way to just kind of get out of the stress of life. So my rent is going to be late, but at least I can party, and kind of doing an erasure there to show what's kind of inside the world that we just accept and accept as normal. Like the fact that that's the only way to deal with this, and there's no other way to escape the fact that your rent is going to be late, that you just have to accept it, and that the way to deal with things is getting drunk about it, and just kind of rehumanize some things that have just been hammered into us as the status quo, as the way things are, as unchanging as the end of history. Basically, I just want to bring back history and bring back the humanity in some things through my poetry, and I'm exploring different techniques to do that now.
I love that, and I definitely want to read that Pitbull poem at some point because that sounds amazing. Sophie or Neha, anything you guys want to add to this question?
Sure. So I mean, as you said, I mean, college is a long ways away, and I'm not sure exactly. Again, I kind of as Radiant said, I'm not sure how my writing will progress since I'm no fortune teller, but um, I think that as I have more experiences, and also human interactions. For example, I mean, I wrote recently, like in the poem that I just read, it was about, I wrote it after driving around rural Maryland and dropping off several books to little free libraries. And so I think as I have more sort of community-based experiences that I interact with different people of different cultures around the world, I think that that will actually inspire my hope a lot more. Um, I think I'd say currently um, that by interacting with people from different cultures, I've learned about the elements of humans that are universal. And that's something that I really want to reflect or reflect more on in my writing as I progress in my career. I've been inspired by Jhumpa Lahiri's Interpreter of Maladies. It's a series of short stories, and most of the stories end up reflecting on humanity in some sort of way, and human interactions and the nuances of those interactions. And so I think that that is by exploring those universal human interactions, I think I will find that my writing becomes a lot more hopeful as I progress down that avenue. So yeah.
Awesome. And I think I'll just close us off with our last question. Just what is one key takeaway that you would want our listeners or anyone to just sort of come away with?
I can start us off, and I would just say I think that something that really struck me throughout our conversation, which I don't actually know if I really expected, was that everyone's concepts of hope, and I sort of already mentioned this, but are so different and so complex. And I think that's really special. And I think, especially as writers, I feel like we perceive things in a very specific way in the way that we think about the world and the way that we then write about it. So I think the fact that all of us have these different perspectives on hope just shows how many different routes it has to grow. And that makes me hopeful because I think it just shows that in all of these individual ways, hope is continuing to kind of um, take its seat and take its path in all of us. And I think that's just uh, really cool that it has all these different routes.
I guess to add on to that, um, I recently, as I also mentioned in the poem that I just read, I received a letter from my, I guess, 16-year-old self, so about a year ago. And essentially the message of that was to write and to never stop writing. I think the amount of times I wrote the word write, it took up like 70% of the page. So I think that that is a huge message that I want people to take away is write and don't stop writing. Write about how you think the world's gonna end, write about how you love the world. Because I think that is a way to approach hope, and I think it's a valuable tool. As I said, I think hope is inherently poetic, and so by writing poetry, you're venturing more into that hopeful feeling, and write about, I guess, seeing the joy in the everyday mundane menial tasks. I think it's very worthwhile, and therapeutic. And yes, so writing to approach hope, I think, is a valuable and practical way, I think, to approach hope.
I guess what I would say is this is a time when hope doesn't seem to be abundant because there isn't hope in pain. There isn't hope in kids getting taken away from their parents. There isn't hope in genocide and starvation. But there is hope in the fact in those relationships, in that parent-child relationship, which is now getting broken, in the communities that existed that are now getting ruptured. Those are hope. And yeah, hope's on the downhill right now. Like violence is winning over hope right now, but that hope still exists. And again, there's nothing hopeful about the pain itself, but the fact that we feel that pain means that there could be a better way. There could be a world when parents and children don't get split up. There could be a world when these communities that have lived in the same place for hundreds of years could stay intact. These things are wonderful about humanity and they are possible. So I guess that's where I find hope in this world.
All right. Thank you guys so much. I think we've had a wonderful discussion, just a wonderful experience overall.
Absolutely. Thank you guys so much. Those were such beautiful answers, and I think a great way to end our discussion and our performance. So thank you guys again for taking time out of your nights and out of your weekend to do this. We really appreciate this. And we'll set out the link once this is released on YouTube